welcome to Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians on the Bluegrass Situation Podcast Network. It's me, Cindy House, the host of this folk podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am so thrilled to have Bruce Molsky and Darol Anger on the pod today. It is a funny and lively conversation that we'll get to in just one moment. But before that, please, friend, have you signed up for the Basic Folk newsletter? Oh my God, it is so easy to do. You can go to the link in the show notes, or you can check out basicfolk.com, and there's a red sign up for the newsletter button there. It's a once-a-month email that we send out to let you know what's going on with the podcast, who's been on recently, who's coming up, and all of our thoughts and feelings and cute pictures of our wife and our dogs. That's right. You can sign up for the newsletter. Again, link in show notes or basicfolk.com. If that's not your thing, social media, we are there on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Basic Folk Pod. You can also, if you are so inclined, if you're like, man, I'm follow you on social media and I'm on your newsletter. What more could I do for you? Well, actually, now that you've asked, we are actually a listener-funded podcast. So you can go to basicfolk.com, make a contribution there, or you can go to the link in the show notes. It can be something like, $50 or $5 a month or, whatever you want to do. But every dollar really helps, and we really appreciate it, because we work so hard on this podcast, and it does take a lot of work, and it's not free to produce. So thank you so much if you are a contributor, or if you're contributing right now after you hear me talk about how important it is. Okay, let's get to it. The names Bruce Molsky and Darol Anger have come up more often than not when talking to fiddlers on Basic Folk. The pair have single-handedly mentored hundreds of our favorites in fiddle music at Berklee College of Music in Boston, Darol's online music school, music camps, festivals, and more. Darol and Bruce join us on the occasion of their newest folk music collab, their new Lockdown Breakdown album. Folk music has often been associated with nerdiness, so we get right into their nerdy roots with Bruce's love of fountain pens, his background in mechanical engineering, and all the facts about American roots music, bluegrass music, and fiddle music you can stand. They each talk about their origins, Bruce in the Bronx and Darol in Northern California, which eventually led him to co-founding the David Grisman Quintet. We discuss the social aspect of the old-time and bluegrass music world and how that has translated into the way they each approach socializing. They discuss the thousands of fiddle lessons they've given younger players and why they like to mentor younger generations. And of course, the album, which was recorded live in a Nashville studio in just a few days. They talk about what the energy was like in the room for all their live takes during the session. It was a pleasure to speak with these two very funny, very influential musicians. They are doing incredible and important work. Okay, let's hear a clip from Lockdown Breakdown. This is actually the title track, and then we'll get to our conversation with Bruce Molsky and Darol Anger on Basic Folk. Okay, guys, welcome to Basic Folk. Happy to have you here.
Thanks, Cindy.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting us. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, I'm thrilled too. It's great.
I feel like your names come up more often on this podcast than not. So it feels like a real turning point for us here on Basic Folk. And I thought that we would start by talking about nerds. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this is that I was watching, so Darol runs an online music school, and you have this 22-minute supercut of all of the guest instructors that you've had on. And there's a spot where Bruce appears in a performance with Darol, and he says, "Thank goodness nerdiness is back in style because it never stopped for me." And then Bruce suggested people listen to the Anthology of American Folk Music. Which, Bruce, I don't think that's nerdy at all. But how do you each relate to nerddom throughout your life, and where has nerdiness intersected with music?
Well, I think a place to start would be to define nerdiness, because it has kind of a negative connotation, maybe to some people. But I think nerdiness is just something that you don't worry about when you are so deep into something that you don't care what anybody else thinks, you know.
That's a great definition. Yeah, I love that.
One of my hobbies is that I collect antique fountain pens. It's really fascinating, the evolution of the technology and the evolution of the materials, the construction materials. And I guarantee you, I could glaze you over in 5 minutes. With all that, I've got shelves of different colored inks over here, and I would call that nerdy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and I bore everybody with a description of how the soundpost works. Within the inside the fiddle itself. It's the post that keeps the back and the top from getting too close together, and I think just being willing to really go down the rabbit hole on just about any subject that you're interested in, and being fascinated by a lot of different things. I guess that's nerdy. I just don't have my pocket protector on right now, though, so I might not qualify totally.
Hey, listen, I was a lot of us musicians have merchandise, that non-CD merchandise that we sell at gigs. And I had tote bags for a while. Curly Ray Klein had keychains. But, one of the things that I really wanted to have for a long time, which was an idea that was rejected, was my little company is Tree Frog Music. I wanted to have Tree Frog Music pocket protectors.
I would wear one. You get that going, man.
Would you? It never came to pass, but we're still kicking around, and it might happen.
That's great.
The other thing I noticed about you two is that you're both very funny, and I was wondering if you could each describe the other's sense of humor.
Oof. Who goes first on this one, Darol?
I think I don't know. I love Bruce because he's kind of old school on that stuff. He actually knows jokes and can recite them. And
I always kind of thought of myself as the Margaret Dumont of the old time music scene.
Yeah, you're willing to be a straight man, which is really such an important element.
Darol, you're Mr. Stream of Consciousness, and it's comforting to be on stage with you. It's comforting to be with you all the time because you're like my brother, but but especially on stage, because if I don't really have anything to say in that moment, I can count on you to say something I was not expecting.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm a good babbler, and I'm good at collapsing, logical distinctions, categories. It's one of my hobbies. I'm kind of a nerd about that.
Sweet. Okay. I wanted to learn a little bit more about what music liked for each of you. So we'll start with growing up. We'll start with Bruce. So this is all the information I could find about your childhood. You ready? Okay. Bruce Molsky, born in the Bronx, 1955. Your parents got you playing guitar as a hobby. On the new record that you guys just released, you all cover a classic 1968 soul song, Can I Change My Mind by Tyrone Davis, which was playing on the radio back in the day. We'll call it back in the day. And you write in your track by track, radio was an escape, and songs were something that you could believe and believe in, even if you weren't quite old enough to have had your heart broken yet. Love that. So Bruce, set the scene for music in your house growing up in terms of like radio, playing guitar. What was everyone else listening to?
Wow. Okay. Where do you start? In my house, I don't come from a musical family. I'm a second generation American. I was expected to go to college and rise to a level above where my first generation parents came from, and music was not in the cards for that.
Where did they come from?
My parents lived all their lives in the Bronx, but their parents, all on both sides of the family, came from Eastern Europe, and very much loved America and loved the opportunity, and their notion, having been deprived of a lot of the things we take for granted in this country, their idea of success was security and education, and as something I always respected. But I get, maybe it's because I kind of had it easy growing up. I mean, I understood that, but I also was really moved by the radio. And when I was a kid, we had AM radio. FM was brand new. So there, I'm showing my age, but there were only in New York City, there were two main pop music radio stations, WMCA and WABC. And because there were only two stations, those stations covered every possible musical style that was not classical. And there wasn't really talk radio yet, thank God. But if you wanted, I liked R&B. I liked what we now call old school. We called it soul music back then. I loved folk music. I loved protest music and hard rock. And the cool thing about having so few choices, if that sounds like it makes any sense, was that you'd hear everything. I could be sitting there waiting for Napoleon the 14th to sing "They're Coming to Take Me Away," haha, but I'd have to listen to the Beatles and Barry McGuire singing "Eve of Destruction," and just everything that came by, and it was a huge, unexpected education for me. And Daryl's heard this story many times, and he has an association with how I ended up playing music. But in my public school, I went to city schools in New York. Dr. Billy Taylor ran the great jazz pianist and educator. He ran a program called Jazzmobile, where famous jazz musicians would come visit the schools, and he himself came to my school when I was in the 5th grade. And that was the day he had a teachable moment with me. And that was the day in my life where I realized that not only did I love music, but maybe I could play it, And so I went home from school that day and asked my mom if I could have guitar lessons. And they sent me around the corner thinking it'd be a cute thing for their kid to do. And I studied with Sid Glickman for 8 months, and he threw me out. I went through half of the Carcassi classical method.
Why did you get kicked out?
Well, he said he taught me everything that he could.
Oh, all right.
I'm probably a little rebellious, but we'd have 30-minute lessons, and half of it was the Carcassi classical method, which actually kind of sunk in a little, and the other half was playing folk songs from some folk song book. But my teacher's idea of performing a folk song for him that I'd studied all week was to play one verse and then we move on to the next song. So I knew the first verse of about 37 songs by the time we parted ways. And then it just kind of went from there. You know, I had a really bad rock band when I was 14, and we played in the basement of many halls where people thankfully couldn't hear us. And then it became a social thing.
Nice.
I could blab on and on and on about this, but at the end of the day, it's just very much of a social thing. I wanted to be in the club. And there were all these kids around playing folk instruments and banging on guitars and singing cool songs. And I wanted to be them, you know.
Now, Darol, it's your turn. I could find less about your growings up, but you did it in Northern California. You grew up in Northern California, inspired by jazz artists, Dave Brubeck, Vince Guaraldi, among others. You also went to Santa Cruz to jam with other bluegrass musicians, founding member of the David Grisman Quintet. But take us back to, like, what did the formative years look like, musically speaking?
Well, I was born in the Pacific Northwest, and then my family moved to New Jersey for a fateful just 2 years. We were in right across 2 rivers from Bruce, actually. And we were probably listening to WABC at the same time.
Huh.
And I got excited about music when I heard the Beatles come on, and that was an amazing moment for me. That kind of somehow I felt like, okay, I could do this. Asked for guitar lessons and so forth. So when we got back to California, back to the West Coast, that was kind of an important period for American music, I think. This was the mid-'60s, and around the San Francisco Bay Area, there was a lot of music going on and some great FM radio stations. We graduated to FM at that point. So those DJs on those stations were playing the edge of radio, really, you know, and DJs would, you know, they were, you know, usually pretty educated, and they actually had a lot of freedom to play whatever they wanted. So you'd get Shostakovich next to Hendrix and things like that, you know, in addition to all the pop music that was happening.
Why wouldn't you?
Well, of course, you know, but that's the thing, right? You know, it just seems like this is the way that, you know, you learn about music. Music is music. So that got beat into me pretty hard, you know, just that, you know, I mean, you're already ruined. If you're a fan of the Beatles, you're already ruined for any kind of pure, you know, form of any kind of style, right? Because those guys just mixed everything together. So that worked for me. I just kind of took it as a given. And when I finally discovered fiddling and bluegrass, I was 13 or 14. I'd been taking classical violin lessons because I couldn't actually physically press down the strings on the guitar. So I switched over to violin because I thought it would be easier. But so anyway, so that was interesting. But discovering fiddling was really the thing that put me into the social world of music, and because that opened up the whole bluegrass music and just about everything else, really, you know, because out there, you know, pretty far away from the source, in California, you know, people, you know, there's all the music is getting mixed up anyway. People just want to play music, and I'd moved to, you know, to go to college. I moved to this resort town on the beach, basically, and so there was a lot of music there. That was Santa Cruz, and I just kind of got involved, and then, you know, because I was in the right place at the right time, I got to join the David Grisman Quintet, even though it wasn't the quintet until, it was a quintet before it was the David Grisman Quintet. That thing. And then, you know, the rest is ancient history, really, you know, as far as that goes. You know, it's the previous century, whole previous. Yeah, but I think, you know, Bruce and I, you know, we both had a love of that kind of urban pop music, as well as the really weird stuff. I was introduced to Harry Smith's anthology by a college professor. In fact, I dropped out of college after I took that class, that survey class, because I figured there was nothing left to learn. That was it. My big career decision: drop out of college, play bluegrass music in pizza parlors. And look what happened.
Oh my God. I have a question about playing music full time in a moment, but also Bruce was just talking about the social aspect. You both were mentioning the social aspect of the type of music that you're playing. What do you like about that part of the music? Like, are you naturally shy about it and music makes you bold? What is socializing like for each of you?
Oh boy. Well, as the more folky of the two of us, I'd say, the kind of music that I first wanted to play was a vehicle for being around people and having something more in common with them. And that was a great motivator for me. And it was fueled by this musical style that had nothing to do with my upbringing, because I'm not a mountain man. I tried to be one. I failed. I tried to buy a wood stove. I accidentally bought a coal stove. I mean, it didn't work out so well. But I just, for me, the old music, which I now take seriously and as a course of study, it was a refuge. It was a means to get me there, and it got me close to people I wanted to be, hang out with. And eventually, I picked up and left New York. Some more complicated circumstances, but I wanted something else. I wanted a different lifestyle, and of course, once you grow up, you realize that people are people wherever you go. But I wanted something that I romantically thought of as a simpler life. Haha. So I moved into a cabin and froze my cookies off all winter, and it went from there. But it was very much of a social.
Where was the cabin?
It was on the side of Little Hogback Mountain outside of Lexington, Virginia, in Rockbridge County.
Wow.
In 1976. So that lasted until I ran out of firewood and money, and I got a job.
Man, we got to go make a bronze plaque, man. Go find that cabin.
That cabin is long gone, man. I checked.
Oh, really? You went back? Okay, cool. Oh.
I went back years later, and it was a wonder it stood for the time I was there.
Really? Yeah.
All right, Darol, anything else to say about socializing?
Most, I think a lot of, many creative people, are shy, people who have been, a lot of internal stuff going on, but, might not be great at sharing it. And I started out as a very shy person, and I've worked very hard to become, gregarious, and following in the footsteps of my mother. Actually, my mother was a extremely sociable person. And I always admired that, and would try to figure out how to do that. And
how'd you do it?
Finally, music, play music a lot. Mm-hmm. And keep doing it, and then pretty soon, if you just don't go away, people start, start thinking you've done something, and then they start respecting, this particular style of music, and any kind of roots music at all, does not necessarily reject older people, or people who have had some experience, which is, so I think for both Bruce and me, that was a very smart move that we might not have actually. Well, we both respected, the older musicians and the people that had been doing it a long time, and the knowledge and the experience is it's a plus in this particular field of endeavor, I think. Mm. Yeah.
So Bruce, you went to Cornell, and I read that you were a mechanical engineer for like a good long while. And I think you started doing music full time in the 90s.
Yep.
where Darol was a professional touring musician. It seems like, well, you dropped out of college, so straight from dropping out of college. What can you each say about music as work, music as your main source of income, and Bruce, especially coming from your perspective of making that transition from your first profession as an engineer to musician?
Oh boy. Well, it sure is different working for yourself than working for somebody else. And I was raised to, value security, and I had a good job designing large piping systems for large buildings. It's exciting. It seemed like a good thing, but you can run out of gas for something after a while. And I always played music seriously. I hesitate to say on the side, but it was on the side in the sense I wasn't making money at it. I just did it because I loved it. And at one point, I just decided to take a chance. I mean, I have very little musical anything in my family, but I just decided in 1997, I'd take 1 year off of my grown-up job. And that was in 1997, and I never went back.
Yeah, 27 years later.
And the thing that I realized, I tell a lot of my students this at Berklee, that, they come and they say, I'm teaching primarily music, but music is a lifestyle. And they say, well, how do I make a living at this? And I say, well, rule number one is make more than you spend. And I think enable yourself. And seriously, I mean, the thing that I learned being in the work and private sector was budget, schedules, and deadlines. And I've always, without getting into the really boring stuff that your folk audience probably won't want to hear about, you do have to pay attention to those things if you want to sustain yourself, and that was 20 years. I worked in carpet factories and engineering offices, and that was, if I learned anything at all in a general sense, it was that you can ask Darol or any professional player that you talk to, for every hour that we get to do the thing that we really, really love to do, get up on a stage, entertain people, make recordings, do this, there's 8 or 10 hours of all the other administrivia and BS that you have to do. Mm. It just becomes part of it's a lifestyle, if you will, I guess. Would you agree, Darol?
Oh yeah. It's funny. I was kind of on my own as far as just making a living from really just as soon as I graduated from high school, and I was living in a really inexpensive place and living inexpensively, and of course at that time period, in our early 20s, I was paying, my rent was like $90 a month and gas was 29 cents a gallon. So, it wasn't really that challenging to get by, in some ways.
What were the interest rates?
I wasn't even aware that there was, I was just interested, and that's about all of my definition of
your interest rate was high.
Yeah, but when I, got, got with David, David Grisman had a great business sense and was very, pragmatic about the whole thing. I remember walking into his office the first time and saying, this guy has a file cabinet. He's a musician with a file cabinet and he files stuff. Going, I could do that. That's amazing. That's great. You can actually buy your own file cabinet. That was, that kind of, I think I've always had a pretty dramatic person. Bruce, you say, make more than you spend. It seems like pretty basic thing, but people don't always follow that. But the idea of, being organized and keeping track of your numbers, whatever they may be, is a huge thing. And the amount of, we always joke that, what we get paid for really, as musicians is to, get there and to travel and to just, experience the incredible hassle of, everything it takes just to step on the stage. Music's free,
Yeah.
and that's a good, attitude adjustment that really makes it possible to.
Well, that's what the head of Spotify seems to think, but that's another conversation.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. That's a whole, but that's supply side or whatever it is. That's the trickle down.
Have you all heard of the other 22 Hours podcast?
No.
Songwriter Michaela Ann and her husband Aaron Schaefer Heiss. It's like the other 22 hours, like you're playing 2 hours on stage as a musician, but what are you doing the other 22 hours?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
I'll send it to you guys. So you can check it out. It's a really good podcast.
Cool.
Okay. How did you guys meet? I want to hear the story of how you met. I've read about how you felt about meeting each other and how you felt when you first heard the other play. Here are some quotes. Darol: I knew that we had to play music together and that I could learn a lot from him. Confident, right? Bruce, the other side of the telescope. The first emotion to hit when I first heard Darol play was outright gobsmack. The second emotion came shortly after when he asked me to play with him. Fear. Not as confident. Where and how did it happen? I couldn't find any record of this online. It may exist, but where and how did it happen? And what were you going through at the time that maybe made this friendship click?
Ooh, wow. Well, I know that.
Do you remember the first time we met? I think I know, but
yeah, we were kind of looking for a opportunity. We were both traveling a lot and kind of moving in different slightly different, but we actually got together at the fiddle camp of one of the other most influential fiddle players in the world, Alistair Fraser's fiddle camp in California. Bruce was teaching there, and I was living pretty close by, so I managed to sneak into the camp uninvited, we just because we were familiar with each other's music from listening to each other's recordings, so it was like our reputation preceded itself or something. I think we were both pretty prepared. Basically we just played music for 6 or 7 hours, starting. I got there pretty late, about 11. So, yeah.
And do I remember correctly that Mark Schatz was in on that session?
Yeah, we had to like come in. We had to take over his room, actually, because there was no other place to do it.
And Eileen Carson, rest her soul, she was dancing on picnic tables and everything else.
Yeah, that was great. So they were witnesses to that little jam session there. But it just was so, I always compare getting to play with Bruce to like a great, chiropractic session. I always feel like I've had an alignment, just so, just straightens everything up.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I have a quote from Bruce about playing with Darol that maybe you could expand on, Bruce. He said, "Playing with my old pal Darol Anger is like musically coming home and taking a trip to Mars at the same time."
Well, yes, I meant it. But
Done.
We've been playing together for so long that even though we kind of, in some ways, come stylistically from opposite ends of a spectrum, we've been doing it so long that we have found more and more common ground, to me, and a common voice. And some of it is familiarity, some of it is really wanting to know what he's thinking about, because there's no musician in the world I respect and admire more than Darol, and I'm not blowing smoke about that. and so in the sense of coming home, whenever we tune up to play, there are things about how we play that I can depend on, that I don't have to worry about.
Yeah.
But I also know, the kind of space travel part is that I know he's going to challenge me harmonically, because I'm a folk musician. Who is it that said that all the money is below the fifth fret? I mean, it's just, I like chords. Don't get me wrong, but he's shown me alternatives to harmonizing things and just melodic ideas, and I'm always learning something. And yet I don't feel like I'm going to, fall off the edge of the road or anything.
Mm.
Well, not usually.
It sounds like it's not scary, but you still learn stuff.
No, it used to be really scary. And that was my own personal journey, was getting used to the idea that every musician is good at what they're good at, and they're not going to be good at everything. And then rather than being intimidated by what I didn't know, was, by God, learn it, and I've just learned a lot.
Was it just intimidation? Was there any jealousy?
No, I'm not a jealous person like that, I guess. I've never
Good
been.
thing too.
Yeah, very admirable.
Don't hate me because I've still got hair, that kind of thing.
Don't brag.
I'm not, I had nothing to do with it. I can't help it. I could, but yeah, we both have such, Bruce is like, he said the Rock of Gibraltar, you just never have to worry about how it's going to go. And he's got a great, his sense of, story and, how a tune develops and everything. I think what's really interesting is that, you have all this knowledge of musical structure that maybe didn't get put into the fiddle, but, you've been a guitar player forever and you know all this pop music and you play it great. And there's all this other stuff going on that, you know all this. You're familiar, and what you've done with Appalachian fiddling and other regional fiddling, you're always sort of just adding your own thing, to it, as all those traditional fiddle players did. They all improved it, they all improved these tunes. I improved that. And that's, and that's part of what, makes you one of the most influential people, because, with you fiddling those styles, they sound as good as they are, and there's a joke in especially when in traditional music and folk, that kind of folk music where, this stuff is really, it's better than it sounds, because you hear these scratchy records and, all that stuff. And Bruce, your commitment to technical excellence and your gearhead, your signal path is the same as, hydraulics in a way, and you're.
Are you saying that I'm a nerd? Yeah.
Only in the best way, so yeah.
I think, well, if I can just relate one thing, having taught this stuff for so long, I think that, those of us who grew up listening to those crunchy old recordings of people that might have been old and past their playing prime, a lot of people feel like that's how the music goes, and I respect that. They're the recreationists in my mind.
Yeah. Well, it's like that whole scene of people wanting to play Bach, like Bach played it.
Right. And
that's
Bruce, you're talking about in the traditional folk and old time world.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And because a lot of it comes from reverence of a lot of these old players. We really looked up to them, and I certainly did. But I discovered in my own musical world, in the same way that they were, people from previous generations were influenced by the music that they heard around them, like James P. Johnson and Louis Armstrong and all the pop music of the day. They were wide open to those kind of ideas. And if you listen to Ed Haley, he's the perfect example of the great fiddler from West Virginia. But to me, in the context of my life, living in the year that I'm living, I want to clean it up so that people can appreciate it in a different way. And I'm not what am I trying to say? I'm trying to present the music in a way that modern audiences can see some commonality with the other stuff they hear around them.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by clean it up? Not play like I'm 93 years old and not consider that to be the frame of reference by which you're supposed to play this stuff. So just to dig into that a little bit, like when you say not to play like I'm 93 years old, what exactly would that mean? Like I'm not going to try to answer the question for you, but what does it mean?
What does it mean? God. All right. Here I'm going to be careful not to get myself in trouble with the hardcore traditionalists, but I mean, Darol, I consider it a compliment that you think of me more as a musician than a fiddler, because what I hear in music, the storytelling aspect of music is something that I try to bring into my own, and you help me with that, which is a lot of my heroes played dance music. And so when they played a piece of music, they played a tune maybe over and over and over again, and it got embellished in their mind. To me, the music that I grew up with, even the pop music on the radio, has a story, and it has a trajectory, and it starts with a thought, and that thought builds, and the functionally that means embellishing on a theme and adding all the stuff that you think is really cool, and then coming back to some enlightened idea at the end. And I think that's what bluegrass tried to do in the early days by taking on the form of early jazz, playing a theme, having solos, and then coming back to some slightly more exciting thing at the end.
Yeah.
Is that true? It took that right from jazz?
Darol could probably speak to it better than me, but that's the sense that I've always had, is when they took a community dance music and put it on the radio, people didn't want to hear the same thing played over and over and over and over again, that it needed to have some kind of variety and form.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. People were not going. People were, influenced by what was on national radio. CBS had gotten their national broadcasting thing, and pop music was out there, and the idea that and jazz, where people were expressing their individuality in the context of songs, and whether or not they were improvising or whether people had sort of made up a break for themselves to express that part of the song, it's kind of irrelevant. It's just that, you see the forms start to, get more like this commonality, start to, people were picking up on the idea of like these little stories, very effective, very human.
One of the things I'm really proud of in Darol's and my new recording is that I feel like each track tells a story, that it has that kind of build in it.
Yeah.
And that's just how I feel about it. But to me, that accomplishes something that I wanted to accomplish, which is starting with an idea, making a connection between two fiddles and maybe a voice, and then just going for broke.
Yeah. That doesn't mean that we might not want to, if we get together at a camp, fiddle camp or a dance, which, there's a lot of that stuff out there, that we might not want to play a tune 350 times in a row, and because once you get to about the 60th time, things really start getting good. And that's something that Bruce taught me, that, once you start you play these things enough, and things get to a whole other level.
Wow.
The trick is, for recording or performance, try to get that to that intensity, kind of telescope that all into, 4 or 5 minutes. That's a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we all live for those moments, when you've been playing something for long enough to where it's kind of playing itself, and then you can really hear it. And I've had people who play in other styles come to me and say, I never really understood why you people would want to play something 47 times until I did it. And then I realized that something happened that never happened before.
Wow.
So there's a kind of a mantric meditative quality to this kind of music. It certainly is for me.
I was texting with Marielle Vandersteel about you guys coming on.
Oh, yeah, cool.
And I was asking her, I was like, any hot tips on what to ask these guys? And this kind of came from Marielle. So going back a little ways, you would learn songs from these source musicians, these older musicians, who are always happy to share their knowledge with the younger crowd. And then Bruce just explained that seems like some people copy them verbatim and other people don't do that. I've also heard that, so from Marielle and from Reputation, I've heard that you both are at the forefront of being accessible and have been mentors to so many young string players. So can you talk about why you're happy to share with the younger crowd?
I think we both been the beneficiaries of generosity from older musicians, right? I mean, we both
10-4. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
People were really generous with us, and it's really nice to feel, true or not, like you're a link in a chain.
Yeah.
Makes you feel like you're part of something. I mean, I started off as a young guy, and I'm not anymore. And I'm the guy that, I'm the age of the guy that I was looking up to now. When somebody comes to me and wants to learn this stuff, I'm moved by that, especially if they take it seriously.
Yeah.
Which most of my students at Berklee do.
And Darol, when I was watching your supercut for your online school, it seemed like you were really learning from the younger people on that you're like invited on to be guest instructors.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So much. I mean, it's because now it's like everything, there's so much available, and, there's the recent, there's the camps and the festivals and all this. There's such a great, cultural structure, to really be a carrier of this stuff, to carry this stuff. I guess the cliche is forward, but you're carrying it, I don't know, you're just carrying it wherever it goes, and people have big opportunities to learn from many different people. So a lot of these younger folks, they're supposed to be better than us, because if they're not, like, what are we doing?
Right. Good point. Yeah.
I don't know. I can name a bunch of people, like Byron Berline and Vassar Clements and people like that, who just were so generous with me and just would really share all this stuff. Certainly David Grisman and Tony Rice, who was not that much older than me, but had experienced a lot more of everything.
So, all right, here's a question for you guys. Bruce was saying if somebody wants to learn from you, that's great, especially if they take it seriously. Like, is there a certain amount of skill that somebody would need to have if they came to you and said, like, hey guys, I want to jam with you? Like, you are each very technical players, but this music, like we were talking about, is very social. It's very easily accessible. So how do you walk that line, like in your concerts and teaching and jamming with newer players that like maybe are brand new to their instrument? They might be intimidated. How do you work on being so virtuosic and being welcoming at the same time?
Well, it's some kind of structural thing where, okay, we're in a position, okay, everybody's here for a certain thing, and there's people that are at a certain level. And, nice thing about this kind of music is that there's, no matter what, whether you've been playing 2 weeks or 30 years, there's a tune that is right for you. There are ways to play. There's a style, and there's a way of playing the fiddle, that you can pretty much, there's a lot of different levels of just tunings.
Darol, are you going to run the slow jam at the fiddle camp?
If they hire me and they're paying me and all, and it's yeah, of course, yeah, we'll play Boil 'em Cabbage Down until it's boiled.
Bruce, how about you? Are you running the slow jam at the fiddle camp?
Oh God, yeah. The problem with me is that when I start the slow jam tune, I forget to stop, and because it becomes a mantra. I love to play with people. I don't think about where I am in the hierarchy of technical virtuosity or whatever you call it. When I'm playing music, I'm just playing music, and to me, playing music is engaging the other person I'm playing with. And yeah, sure, it's more fun to play with some people than others. But anybody that comes and is really into it and is really feeling, you can feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't need to hear people playing flat 5 substitutions in F sharp minor. I don't care. But what I want to hear is feeling and spirit. And to that, I try to adjust myself to the person that I'm playing with so that we can have a conversation. About that slow jam thing. I was leading the slow jam at Swannanoa and at Warren Wilson College years ago, and we had a big crowd of people, and we were playing or some real common tune really slowly. And I had my ball cap pulled over my head, and did not realize how long I'd been playing it. And my friend Paula Bradley, who was playing guitar, all I remember is her leaning underneath my hat and saying, "Are you going to stop soon?"
We all want to go to bed.
I gotta go to the bathroom.
The jam was over 10 minutes ago. You're still playing the same.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's so funny. You're both associated with Berklee. Bruce, is this still accurate? You are the visiting scholar in the American Roots Music Program?
That's my job title, yeah.
Okay. And then, Darol, you are a professor at Berklee?
Well, I'm an emeritus at this point. I kind of retired. I did 10 years in the string department there at Berklee, and that was really an incredible 10 years. It's amazing. I got to work with some of the most, incredible musicians.
On being an instructor versus being a performer, how do you separate the two, and what was harder for you each to master?
Oh, definitely instructor. I don't know about you, Bruce.
I just see them as such really different things. I don't know how to compare them. Teaching to me is an opportunity to clean up my own stuff. I teach by ear. I teach a player some phrase of something, and I play it with them. And of course, I'm listening to see if they're doing it right, but it also gives me a chance to clean up my own playing. And I think that teaching has taught me a lot. I think teaching doesn't necessarily just go in one direction.
Right.
But it's that I don't even know how to compare that to performing. I think.
Yeah. I know that. Yeah, it's you really don't realize how little you know until you try to teach it, and once you've taught something, that's when you really figure out whether you know it or not. And that's the challenge, is to know it well enough to teach it.
Boy, I've thought of tunes that I thought I really knew well, and on some of these online courses that I was teaching when the pandemic was at its worst, and I think, oh yeah, man, I'll teach this tune. I've been playing this tune a long time, and about 10 minutes into it, I kind of realized, oh crap, I don't know this as well as I don't know it well enough to relate it to somebody else, and there's a lesson in that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of preparation, I think, involved in teaching, and you really, if I'm going to teach a tune, I better go over it and maybe, write it out or just do all these things. And then, as you do that, you start looking at these different angles of it. You find so many things about the tune that this tune is actually great for a lot of different reasons than just oh, I just like this tune, because it's fun.
You got to
or
play it
something.
60 times,
Yeah, and maybe, just
and then you can teach it.
what's going on in the second part that's the same thing as in the first part, or like why is the beginning like the end, or like what's going on when there's like all these things that structural things that are happening, and a really great tune, it's they're amazing, it's like discovering like the mathematical basis of the universe or something. It's just so cool, it's like discovering that the orbital proportions of all the planets are, in actual, proportions to each other, and they can be mathematically expressed, and all that, crazy stuff.
You really think about that?
Sometimes, not all the time.
Bruce, I could see what you mean by feels like you're on Mars.
Yeah, but I like Mars.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying I don't like Mars. I just I just feel like we all just went to Mars.
I heard on the news today that they've confirmed that there's water on Mars.
Wow.
Right. Yeah.
Big oceans of underground water. What does that tell you? I don't know.
So it's a lot of digging. I don't know. Don't make me do it.
Well, I got a couple questions about this record, and then we'll wrap up with a very fun lightning round that you will enjoy.
God, I'm afraid. Okay.
All right. The record, Lockdown Breakdown. It sounds like this was a huge project for both of you. Bruce said all this testing each other's limits eventually pushed us into wanting some sort of record, a sort of musical history of us. You've also said it's one of the most important things I've ever done with my fiddle, a really important confluence and milestone. Sounds like a big friggin' deal.
You're gonna make me cry, man.
So this sounds like a huge task for an epic friendship. Did it feel like an epic legend in the making kind of project? Like, what was your approach like? Was it joyful? I would probably be kind of stressed if I were you guys, if you're like, we've had such a romantic fiddle friendship for so long, and we're going to make this record together that explains it all. Maybe it was both joyful and stressful.
I never found it stressful myself.
Yeah, that was the great thing, I mean, we just, it was cool because I'd moved to Nashville, and you'd come down a couple of times, you and Audrey had visited, and we'd got to hang out and go see people and do all this stuff. And we'd always wind up in the kitchen and going, and playing like crazy. And then one kitchen session, I guess we just said, well, when are we gonna? Let's just make the record, because it had been something that had been on our minds. I mean, Bruce has been on my records. I've been on Bruce's records. We've done, it's. And so, well, when are we going to do this fiddle record? And, well, let's just do it because, when else are we, no time like next month. So it really was, like a snap decision that was like 20 years in the making, It's just really a matter of pulling the trigger, really.
I never had any aspiration to make a big dent in the fiddle world with something new and unbelievable. To me, it was just a chance to do something, to embellish on something I already really loved and have a record of it. I mean, really in the sense of the definition of the word record. It's just people like to call it a snapshot or something like that. But I just really thought we've been doing something really cool. And
the thing that we do together, right?
I still feel that way. We're not done. It's just, this is just
it's definitely, I wouldn't call it like some ground shaking, groundbreaking, I mean, not in the sense of like, some of the other things that you've done, if you look at the cumulative work that you've done, Bruce, on record, that is ground shaking and groundbreaking. And, to some extent, I've changed some things for people too, but this record is just, it's like this thing that we do together is so cool. Let's just, let's get a snapshot of it, Let's get a selfie,
I want to hear about how it was made in terms of like, you did this record in live takes together at a studio in Nashville in just a few days. So a live take, for those who are listening, don't know, Darol and Bruce sat in the studio together and played the songs that were recorded. If anybody messed up, you'd have to start over again. There was no like dubbing in of tracks or anything like that. So some people really love this process and some people are really tortured by it. But how is it like to be in conversation like in this setting and doing all these live takes?
Well, the environment is really important, and we work with the most amazing engineer, Dave Cinco, who just made it all really easy. And we did sit, Darol and I sat knee to knee. There's some videos up on Facebook and places like that. We just sat knee to knee and we just played until it was right, and not to be dishonest, there's some editing, but we were playing into each other's instruments. There was no overdubbing of mistakes.
What is the advantage of sitting knee to knee? Like that would be like faced right at each other.
Yeah.
Oh man, body language. I mean, you don't play music with somebody else just by hearing. You see their intention, you see their energy, and once again, playing with Darol for so many years, I have a sense of what he does, and I think he does of me, and and it's just that. I mean, music isn't just sounds. Music is everything that's happening in the room, and sitting so close, and also the instruments ringing into each other. When I play my fiddle and he's holding his, they ring into each other, and that makes a big difference in the sonic quality of what you get. Dave Cinco did a magnificent job just using all that stuff.
Yeah. It was a big house, with high ceilings, and the kitchen was right there, right off the main room, and just was just a super comfortable experience, and and just that, and we needed that. I mean, to capture, again, it's just how we do things. It's
well, what do people hear when they listen to a recording or a concert? If they're not musicians, musicians are cursed because we have have this problem. If you play me something really cool, I'm so busy trying to figure out how you did it that I don't hear the spirit. and I'm not, I want people to hear how we felt. I want them to hear the story.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Are you guys ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, bring it on. Okay.
You tell us. Are we ready?
This is a game called Which One? The answers are Darol, Bruce, both of us, neither of us. You can say your own name. I'm going to ask you a question.
Aren't you in there, Cindy? Are you a choice?
Yeah, really.
I'm not involved. Thanks. I'm going to go 3, 2, 1, and then after I say 1, give me your answer at the same time.
Is there a question you're going to ask, or are you just going to
Yes, I'm just explaining the rules, Bruce. Okay.
Look, I'm a little slow on this stuff. Okay, I may have to try a few times.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
Which one? Which one is getting up early? 3, 2, 1.
Bruce.
Excellent.
Because he lives in Central Time.
Oh. Well, if you guys are in the same time zone and adjusted, it's not fair. Not fair. Okay. Which one is the better driver? 3, 2, 1.
I'm going to say Bruce, but I'm not a terrible driver. But everybody thinks they're a good driver. But I trust Bruce. I would sit in the car with him, even in the middle of the night.
I wanted to be a truck driver all the time I was growing up.
We both love driving. It's like one of the perks of this gig.
Oh, very nice. That's excellent. Okay. Which one is the faster fiddle tuner? 3, 2, 1.
Me, because I don't do anything. Bruce has to tune his instruments to all different things all the time.
Yeah, Darol's faster.
All right, a couple more. Which one is bringing all the snacks on the road trip? 3, 2, 1.
Me.
Yeah, Darol.
What kind of snacks are we talking about?
I don't know. He never shares them with me.
You don't share your snacks?
Yes, he does. I'm just being facetious. Yeah.
Just goofing around. Yeah, no, roots and berries kind of stuff.
Wild mushrooms and feathers.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the last one.
Okay.
Which one is petting all the dogs? 3, 2, 1.
What dogs?
Where? Where's
all
the
of
dogs?
them. Every dog on Earth.
Okay, all of the dogs. Okay, I'll pet the dogs. Yeah.
So will I, but we haven't done any kind of comparative research on.
That's
You
an
guys
unknown,
are actually pretty terrible at which one.
because it would be cruel, because we're always gone. And we're
Right.
never around.
Yeah.
Well,
Darol, I don't know if Darol, have you ever had a dog? I never had a dog.
Oh, I haven't had a dog, so I would.
so Daryl is the
So
dog.
you definitely got the
The
petting
dog
thing.
was all the dog.
Yeah. I grew up in a small apartment. My father wouldn't have a dog, so.
Well, guys, great interview. Terrible lightning round. We'll fix it in post.
I thought it was fun. Get it in the shrink wrap there.
Thanks for being on.
This was really fun. That's really
Thank
good
you. It was
questions.
nice talking to you. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
This episode of Basic Folk was produced by Anthony Cabrera. Alex Stanton composes our music. Basic Folk is on the Bluegrass Situation Podcast Network. You can find all of our episodes there, wherever you get podcasts. You can search for us on the SiriusXM app under Basic Folk. Find us on folkalley.com or Folk Alley's mobile app, or you can check out our website, basicfolk.com. If you enjoyed this episode, we suggest sharing it with a friend. So recently, I suggested that you share an episode with your mom. This one, ladies, is for the dads. Share this episode with your dad. He picked up fiddling and he was discouraged because it's really hard and scratchy sounding. But send this to him and maybe he'll be inspired to pick it up again. And then you can go on vacation while he's practicing. That is my gift to you. Okay, thanks for listening all the way to the end. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.